Hi, this is Zach with Worn and Wound. Today I'll be taking a look at the Christopher Ward C60 Trident Pro with khaki bezel. The C60 Trident has been, kind of a main feature in C. Ward's line for many years now, and this is actually the first time we've had gotten our hands on one. But it's very easy to see why it's kind of a classic of the brand. It's just a very a familiar-looking diver. It is, and they openly say this on the website, which I have to give them credit for. It's inspired by the 1954 Rolex GMT Master. Clearly, this isn't a GMT, but there was a Trident Pro that also was a GMT, and then this is just a straight-up diver version of it, making it a little bit more, similar to Rolex Submariners. So there's a lot of things going on here that you would be familiar with if you know the Rolex Submariner. Yet I think Christopher Ward does a really good job in taking the watch to its own unique place. It has some really interesting design features that give it its own character. And with this khaki bezel, which is kind of unique, I think it really takes on just a great personality. It's very stylish. It's a very cool looking watch. This watch also costs $535 on NATO. It is available with a bracelet or a leather strap or a rubber strap as well. For actually James Bond's 50th anniversary on the screen, they came out with the NATO version, which we just thought would be fun to look at. This one's $535. Has a sapphire crystal, a Swiss automatic movement, I believe a Sellita SW200-1, as well as just being Swiss made all around. So let's take a closer look now. The case of the Christopher Ward C60 Trident Pro is familiar in many ways, but then actually has some very kind of nice, unique little design details that I quite like a lot. The size of it is 42 millimeters in diameter, 50 millimeters lug to lug, and without the NATO strap there, it's actually 13 millimeters thick. So it has like a nice, medium size to it. I think, it's fairly thin, and all around, it lacks bulk. It's a very kind of streamlined designed watch. Now, looking at it from the top, it's got, like I said, kind of a familiar look, polished lugs on the top. They kind of angle back here. Looking at the side, though, it's a bit more interesting, I just think it's very well executed for what it is, especially at the price point. So, here you can see how the lugs kind of cut back there, which is kind of a unique design feature to this watch. And these big kind of scalloped areas out, they're really nicely finished with like a nice satin brushing here, and then those obviously come to form the crown guards around the guard here, around the crown here at 3 o'clock. So it's very smooth and very well executed. This crown here is about 6 millimeters in diameter and about 5 millimeters long, so it is quite long, but I think the proportions are pretty nice for the watch overall. Flipping the watch over now, and excuse me as I unlace this, you can see the case back here. It's a very simple case back. It has this kind of emblem on it in Latin, Deus Maris Altum. I have to look that up, but otherwise lacks general information on the watch. Just very simple, nothing really special there, but I do like this little logo. Overall, the finishing is quite nice, I have to say. Now, looking at the bezel, so, one of the unique features of this specific model is that it has this khaki bezel insert. Khaki, it's what they call it. Obviously, it's kind of an olive green to kind of Americans, but I believe khaki can be used to refer to tan or olive green, depending on where you are in the world. The bezel has a nice, tooth to the side of it. Turning it, it's a 120 click bezel. It has a little bit of playback if you're wiggling it, but it's sturdy. It's not going to rotate accidentally. The crisp, the snap here is pretty crisp. Overall, I think it's a very decent mechanism. Just get that back there. Yeah, so overall, I think it's really nice. Obviously, if you know Submariners or the Rolexes, this is at 42 millimeters larger, but I think it's kind of more modern, a little bit more sporty than that. And like I said, I think they're really going for their own thing with this watch. The dial of the C60 Trident Pro is especially well executed, and I think a real highlight of the watch and the line. So clearly, refers to various Rolex watches, namely the Submariner and the GMT Master. But it also really differs greatly. So there's a resemblance in these kind of large circles for the index, as well as these thinner rectangles. But the proportions are totally different on this than they are on Submariners, and you have a double dash marker at 12 rather than a triangle. So in the end, I really think it goes its own direction very quickly, and then that's furthered by some other interesting details, such as this kind of waveform texture that's on the black dial itself. can see as I move it around, it's probably picking up light. I really love that detail. It adds a lot of texture to the dial, adds a lot of depth, really gives it a lot of character. I mean, you know, like I said, this watch is pretty affordable at $535, and that's just a detail that really makes it stand out. Then, you know, so looking at the index itself, though, this main hour index is applied, so you have the kind of steel rim around all these kind of loomed circles. You know, it's a nice little detail, adds a little bit of a, you know, kind of something for light to hit. And then around the very perimeter of the watch, you have a second or mid index with then a really kind of like precisely divided seconds for, you know, referring obviously to the automatic movement. So, and that actually has a kind of a nice, really kind of vintage feel to it. You also have these little loomed dots on the very edge, which to me kind of look like tritium dots of vintage watches. At 4 o'clock, you have a date window here. It's probably my least favorite detail of the dial, as it's kind of messes with the symmetry a little bit. You know, on Submariners, the date window is always at 3, and I feel like that keeps the balance a little bit more. There's also the issue where, you know, clearly the date wheel of the movement ends before, you know, basically the diameter that these circles are on, so there's just a little bit of an imbalance there. I do wish they had a non-date dial version, but you know, in the end, it is nice to have a date, so you can kind of go back and forth on that. I personally find it a little disruptive, though. Looking at the hands now, you have these kind of interesting hands that are, you know, kind of articulated in an interesting way and kind of look, you know, almost something like 30s or 40s. So you have this hour hand, which, you know, if you know, like, you know, the Mercedes hour hand has that circle, but this doesn't have the kind of Mercedes cross in it. Instead, it kind of, you know, comes to this tapering point. And then the minute hand is kind of a Roman sword hand, also tapering to a point. It's a very different look. I really like it, I have to say. I think it dresses up the watch in an interesting way. And then, of course, you have this second hand here, which is a thin stick seconds with a red tip. And then this, you know, really nice little trident base, which is just very cool, very unique, and obviously, you know, kind of the branding of the watch. Looking now at the bezel, like I said, you know, it's this olive green. I love that color. I love how it works with the black of the dial. And it's a very simple aluminum insert with, you know, the kind of classic markings and a loomed pearl at 0 or 60. The loom on the watch overall is actually also fairly disappointing, unfortunately. The hour hands and the kind of main index just don't glow very brightly. You have a stronger glow on this outer ring here and on the loomed kind of pip or pearl at 0.60. On the wrist, the Trident Pro wears really, really well. The 42 millimeter size by 50 millimeters it's just a great, you know, sports size, and really gets this kind of classic diver aesthetic across. You know, I personally prefer smaller watches, and 42 millimeter is the max, but I feel like this watch actually wears a bit smaller even than 42. Not really sure why, but overall, you know, the end feeling is just a very comfortable watch, very wearable. And then the look of it, like I said, it's got a classic kind of vintage diver look. It's really handsome. This khaki bezel, I think, is especially interesting. It kind of makes it a little bit mill feeling, and it just, you know, gives you kind of a lot of options, and I don't know, almost ups the masculinity of it a bit. Obviously, a black bezel would be really classic too, but to me, there's just something special and different about this colorway that I really, really liked. So the watch is, you know, I said it's available on various different straps. We wanted to look at it on the NATO because I thought that'd be kind of fun. So here it comes on this classic Bond colored regimental NATO. The lugs, by the way, are 22 millimeters here. It looks cool, but, you know, to my eye, I'm looking at the color relationship between the khaki and the green here, and there's a tiny bit of a clash, but it still works really well with the style of a NATO. You know, and ultimately, I think it's a very, very comfortable watch on a NATO. So I'd actually like to show it to you on some other colors we have. Just wanted to quickly show you what it looks like on a kind of a sand-colored strap. So this is actually, you know, more kind of a classic khaki color in that it's fairly tan, but the tan, you know, kind of mill look with the olive mill kind of look of the bezel here is just really cool, and it kind of makes the watch, I think, a lot much more aggressive looking. So, you know, I definitely, if you had this watch, no matter what strap you bought it with, I'd definitely look for a solid colored kind of olive or khaki drab military strap, because, I mean, that is really cool. That's probably how I'd wear it most of the time. One other option that I really wanted to show you was how it looked actually on one of our NYC NATOs, specifically this graphite nubuck here. I think the you know, khaki has this kind of faded look to it, which I think really really well with the light gray, and it also brings out the black of the dial a bit. And you know, for a non-nylon NATO look, you know, leather's obviously heavier. This is a nice, you know, rugged, perhaps colder weather option, but still gets out that kind of aggressive military look that's kind of coming out with this khaki bezel and just the general classic diver design. So yeah, you know, if you're interested, this is another great way to go. To wrap up, the C60 Trident Pro by Christopher Ward is clearly one of their most popular watches for a reason. The price is really great for what you're getting here. Swiss-made watch, 4mm thick sapphire crystal, which is actually kind of amazing. You know, a good Sellita SW200 automatic movement. You know, for $535. That alone makes this just watch a really great value. Taking it to the next level is really the fact that it's very well executed and very well stylized. You know, it gets those kind of classic Submariner GMT Master you know, cues across, but I think, you know, and they're very open about that on their website, which I have to give them credit for once again. But they really do take it in their own direction, giving the watch, you know, a classic look, but also a distinct look. So you're not going to mix this up with anything. It's not like you're trying to wear a watch you didn't buy. And then, you know, there's all these different color options: bright orange, bright blue, black, gray. I really like the khaki option. I think it's a little bit different, and it's, you know, kind of a little bit meaner looking, a little bit more aggressive since it's kind of a military color. As far as the strap option goes, this one was $535. For $550, you can get it with a leather strap. NATOs are a dime a dozen, so maybe it makes a little bit more sense to pay a little more and get a more substantial strap, because then you can just put any, you know, number of NATOs on it. That's clearly, you know, something that's up to you. One also very cool thing worth mentioning is that, you know, this is the 42mm version, but they just released a 38mm version, which I imagine is going to be really popular. Can't wait to get our hands on one of those to see how that compares. So yeah, please read the full review on Worn and Wound. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, and Twitter. Goodbye.